All right, look at all these faces here this morning. Welcome, everybody. Kevin, do we really have a title for this one?
You're starting off with a tough question to begin with, so I don't think we really do. It's just more of a series of we're trying to get agents together to talk about and discuss, maybe the best practices for a series of events and situations that we find ourselves in. So there's no real title to this, but that's kind of the thought process behind it.
Perfect. All right. So I'm Candy Dykman. I'm with the Mankato office, and my co-host is.
I'm Kevin Sharkey. I'm with the Minnetonka office.
Perfect. So as Kevin kind of said, we're coming up with topics between Kevin and I of kind of those real day-to-day conversations that as agents we have to have. Some of them and most of them are kind of hard conversations. So we kind of thought we could do this and get collaboration from other agents of how do you handle it and share some of your tips and tricks of how you're handling some of these conversations. So with that, we're going to try to get through 2 scenarios today, but if we're having great conversation, we'll only go with one and then we'll save the next one for next time. So Kevin, I'm going to let you talk about the first scenario that you want to visit about.
Yeah, I know that we're coming up onto the busier time of the year, meeting with clients, and I know that there's still a fair amount of confusion out there about the lawsuit and the commissions and how we get paid and and what we talk about to our clients, to buyers and sellers. So I thought we'd revisit that. So the question here that I'm posing to the group for our discussion is, you're meeting with a buyer for the first time. You want them to become a client. And the client or the buyer is curious about the commission lawsuit of 2024 and how it affects him. He wants to know how you get paid and if he will have to pay you, what's under what scenario. The buyer wants to know what happens if seller is not offering a commission and how is the transition different now than before the lawsuit. So how do we answer the questions without scaring them off or doing so much data that they're just, going blank on you? So let's open it up with talking about the lawsuit commissions and how we deal with it with our clients.
All right, that's a good scenario. I'll just start. I have kind of tried both, where I spill everything and I lost them, right? I'm like, oh, okay, the way I did that probably didn't work. To sometimes you give too little and they just keep asking questions. So I've kind of had to try to fine tune mine as well. I've lost some buyers. It's interesting to know, did they ever go look at a house with someone else? Because I had to tell them, I told them how it was. They said, let's pause on this. I'm not going any further. I've never heard this before, so I don't think this is right. And I said, well, can you give me a couple more minutes? And I explained a little bit more about it. And I said, if you come to another realtor, I said, you can call the next realtor down the road. And I'm hoping and trusting they're going to tell you the same thing, but I think I'm finding they're not. And he said, yep, I'm going to do that. And then I followed up with him a couple hours later to see if he read all the information I provided to him. I gave him links to the NAR lawsuit. And he said he read it, but he still didn't believe it. So I don't know how many realtors he talked to before he actually got to look at a house. But so that's been some of my challenges as to, how do you give the right information and not too much and not too little where they need to know. So someone else. Anybody else want to share some pointers? We'll call on you if you don't give any. I have a little visitor I got to get rid of.
I'll put in some 2 cents, even though I'm not actually out there talking with people. I think if you had a really good presentation for your buyer rep contract, even before the lawsuit, this shouldn't be a problem. It should just roll off your tongue because, again, when you filled out that buyer representation contract prior, you had a commission in there, and it stated that if we didn't receive anything from the seller, then they would have to pay. So really, your presentation shouldn't change much at all. But they might ask questions about the lawsuit and why things changed. And then you just need to go from there.
That's a good point. I do make that comment about this is really no different than before. Unfortunately, before we were more loose about signing those contracts right away. Now it's mandatory. We can get fined. And anytime you want to fine somebody, people are going to usually follow the law then, follow the rule. I don't tell people that part, but in my head, that's how I feel about it. But
So how do you start that conversation? So you're sitting down, first time you're talking about yourself, what your services are. We have to talk about it right up front. How do you begin that? And then what parts of it really are essential? I mean, what do we have to cover without it being confusing?
I think, first of all, you always have to start out with the agency disclosure. So by going through those roles that we might play within the transaction of that particular client or customer, they have the options on what they want you to provide for them. Maybe they don't want your representation. Maybe they only want you to be a facilitator. Again, it all depends on what that consumer is looking for from you that you are going to help provide to them. And then, after you present that agency, asking them what they want, then you can go ahead and say, okay, well, if you want my representation, we do need to fill out a contract because that's what the law requires. It has to be in writing. And then you just discuss the buyer rep contract as you did previously. I hope that makes sense.
it does make sense. I think the challenge, though, I do like that you say go over the agency first, which I do. Instead of me asking them how they want representation, I just tell them in the state of Minnesota, this is how you can be represented. If we're going to be a buyer today, you would get buyer representation if you want, if you're looking for facilitate. So I kind of do it that way. I think the hard part is especially if they've been looking at houses for the last 2-3 years, they probably haven't had to sign a contract before they went into the house. And now we're saying they have to. And that's, I think, where I struggle with the buyers is the ones that I didn't have to do this, 6 months ago when I was looking at a house. How come I have to do it now? And that's where you got to educate them. Another thing I think that is a little bit challenging is when someone just calls off of a lead, so you're not sitting in front of them, and they don't want to come in and talk to you. They just want to go look at the house. That's where I would like other people's input too of, how do you get them through that when you're not sitting there having a buyer's consult with them? Now, I can get some people to agree to a buyer's consult, but that first initial conversation over the phone, they don't have trust in you. They don't know you. They might not even like you. They just called because you came up on the lead source. Anybody have any input on that?
I've always been a proponent of using the tour, the 7-day showing. It's not a buyer's rep form. It's just saying that I'm not taking any money for this. I will show you houses for 7 days, and it's just more of a tour agreement because sometimes there's people I don't want to work with, and I don't want to be stuck with in a contract with them from day one. So I kind of like the idea of, especially for someone who's casual coming in, just give them that tour form as part of MLS. It's on North Star, and just show them stuff so you can build your relationship if that's what you want to do, and it's not so scary to the consumer. That's the tough part. You're sitting there with them for the first time. I just met you, and I'm buying you, signing you up for a buyer's contract. That's intimidating for a lot of buyers, and I think it's going to turn them off.
Yeah,
but
I've had a small handful that have done that.
Yeah. So, but the bigger point I'm trying to get at with this, the discussion is, and you said it's very similar to what it was before, which it is, but there's a much greater chance that the consumer is going to end up paying our commission because that's just the way it's structured. And then that's an uncomfortable situation. So I'd like to hear what people's thoughts are on, how to have that conversation, without freaking them out. And I know some agents give so much data that pretty soon the guys are going blank. So I'm just wondering how people handle that part of it specifically.
Nathan, do you have any input?
You had your coffee yet, son?
Not enough. So one thing I like to point out to people to deflect a lot of the negative connotation of that lawsuit is I like to point out that in Minnesota, our forms were actually doing things right all along. It was a nationwide contract because in other states, it wasn't being disclosed properly how the commissions and what amounts were flowing. And it was an easy target for the law firm that took it on. So if you'd like to point that out to people, I said the biggest thing that changes from a buyer representation side is that before, if we were looking at 123 Elm Street, I knew exactly how much they were going to pay if you were going to buy that because it was on the MLS, and now it's not on the MLS anymore. So now I need to call the agent, have discussions about how compensation is being handled. It's been a pretty short window, but I have yet to see a zero or hear from somebody about a zero. So I share that with my clients. When I'm working with buyers, I say in my, it's short experience, but it's mostly business as usual. The biggest difference being that it's not published on the MLS. It's oftentimes not coming from the other broker. It's a value that I need to write into our purchase offer if they write the offer. I really haven't seen a lot of change as far as sellers paying the buyer's representation. Some of the amounts have changed a little bit, which to me isn't a very big deal. But I have had to tell people as well that if you're in love with a house and it is zero, if they're not going to pay it, then we need to look at your numbers and how you want to offer on that house, because you will need to cover the compensation for my representation. Again, hasn't come up yet, and I let people know that, but you have to have that part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you and I had an interesting conversation. This is a little bit off topic yesterday, but when you're listing a house, you encourage the seller to put a zero in there or not offer any cooperative compensation. Why is that?
Excuse me, I prefer that it just be written into buyers. I shouldn't say I prefer. I counsel my sellers that if they put it into a broker, co-op broker compensation, they're agreeing upfront to pay a certain amount. Whereas if it's a competitive listing and by chance we get into multiples and the buyer's agents have to submit their compensation, now that's something that you can quite easily negotiate those terms, and 0.5% on $500,000 goes a long way. Come here, Danny.
So Kevin, you've written purchase or listing agreements at 0% commission. Is that what you're saying? Am I following you the right?
Yeah, for Nathan or for me?
Or Nathan, sorry, Nathan. So Nathan, you've written listing agreements for offering 0% commission to a co-oping broker.
Yeah, most of the ones that I've done recently have been zero, and then when agents call, because I have the conversations with my sellers, I just say sellers are open to paying buyer broker compensation. Write it in on line 406 or 506. I'm blanking right now. I think it's 406.
Yes, 406.
It's 406. Nathan, just make sure that when you're doing that, to get that, and I don't know the form exactly, but to get permission from your seller that you can disclose that.
Sure.
There's a addendum to the listing contract, and I can't remember the name of it, but because nowhere on our listing contract right now does it state that you can disclose if they are going to pay a buyer broker, unless you have that other form.
What if is it okay if we have it written into the other in the very back of that listing contract?
Yep, as long as we have the permission to disclose that information. Because again, everything's got to be in writing. And if you talked about it and then you told an agent, well, Nathan told me to just write it into the purchase agreement, and something goes wrong, we have no way to prove that you talked about it.
Sure. Makes sense.
What are some of the other folks here feel about, talking with your seller and not having a payout or a cooperative payout? What's your take on that? Is that good thing, bad thing? Does it irritate the other buyers, agents? I'd like to hear what other people think.
Hello, good morning. It's Michelle. I had a seller who was wanting to have that co-broke payout because she didn't want to be put in a situation to have to negotiate it on the offer. So that was her choice.
I kind
that
of
makes sense.
approach it this way, as a choice. We can choose to offer a buyer broker compensation and you know what you're gonna get. Or we can let them write it into the offer and it would be kind of a variable unknown. And then I tell them if they're gonna do that, they should kind of know where they wanna be and try to stick to their guns. So it's their choice. They've got two different options or three different options. They've got options on how it can be done.
Okay, so here's a scenario. Your buyer's rep says 2.7. You have agreed to, in the contract to accept a 2.5. What do you do with that other 0.2? Do you change your buyer's rep agreement to bring it down to the 2.5? Or do you make your buyer pay that 2% or that 0.2? What's best practice on that?
I have wrote in the difference on line 406 and had it crossed off by another agent. That's been my one experience with that. And I did accept the less. I mean, I'm fine with accepting less for my buyers, but it should have gone on to a counter offer and not been crossed off by the agent.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that goes back about 30 years that we cross stuff off and put a little X for initials.
I just take whatever the commission is. I don't ask for more.
I think
in my particular situation, I had already had a buyer's rep that was higher than the payout on the property that they were offering on. So I would never ask my buyer to make up the difference. And I have not encountered anybody not. It could get interesting.
Yeah, I think a really good way to approach that is when you're, sitting down and writing that offer and you're going over that buyer compensation disclosure to say, if you are getting cooperating compensation, our contract says, say 3%. And this brokerage is only offering 2.5. There is a 0.5 differential from our contract. And based on our contract, it does say 0.5 that you would have to pay. But I'm not going to charge you that. All I ask is that you send referrals. Send me referrals and it'll make up the difference for that. And I just want you to be happy in your home and make sure that you get this property and it's not based on what I am going to be making. That's how I would approach it.
That's a little along the lines that I do. I let them know. I let it be known that, you guys agreed to 3%. It's only a 2 or 2.5 or whatever it is. I'm not going to ask that because I really want you to get in the house. That's what it's all about. But yeah, if you have any friends and family or referrals, I would appreciate them. I just leave it at that.
So is there any potential RESPA violation with going that route? You know, it's kind of a quid pro quo, is that if you do this for me, I will do that for you. And I know that it's a
You're not
stretch. I'll
demanding
give you
it.
it's a stretch, but I'm just wondering if that's a possibility.
No.
It's not
I mean,
like a contract, you have to do it,
right.
it's just a
Yeah.
conversation in
You're
passing,
just,
maybe?
you're just asking, you know what, I'm gonna do this for you. I'm just asking, you know, just don't forget about me, you know, refer me to your friends and family and, you know, mention my name, whatever. It's not like, okay, in order for you to do this, you have to give me 5 names.
Yeah.
You got to call them right now. And, you know, I need their business. You know, it's not a demand. It's just it's an ask.
How do you reconcile for that contractually then? And like, would you have to amend the rep agreement?
No, because commissions are always negotiable. You can always negotiate them. If you reduce your commission on a listing, do you go back and change the listing agreement? I don't think so. So if you're changing it up, then you have to have it amended. But if you're going down, you don't have to.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's just if it's more,
If you're gonna
then you
ask for
gotta,
more.
yeah, then you gotta amend it.
Dan Baker, what are your thoughts?
I don't have any. I'm just getting the knowledge from all you wise people out there.
Have you encountered anybody that didn't want to sign a buyer's rep because of the new law?
No, as soon as I pull up, I have my little packets in my car. I show them their options and they usually just do a buyer rep immediately right there at the door if I meet them at the first time. And then when it comes to commissions, I always ask for more. If they're asking for 2 or if the seller's given 2, I always ask for the 3 that I put on my buyer rep, and commissions are negotiable.
What's been your success rate on that tactic?
About 50% I get what I
Okay.
ask for. I don't get it all the time. If it's multiple offers, that's a whole different creature.
Right.
And I usually will just take what's offered. However, there are several companies in our area that are not paying out anything. So then I will just put in the 2 when it's a multiple offer. But I do ask on behalf of my buyer for that 2%. And I'd let them know that I'm reducing my commissions for them to get the home.
So let's back that up. You said there are some companies that make it as a policy to not have cooperation. Did I
Yep.
mess that one up?
That is correct.
What's the rationale behind that?
I don't know. That's a company policy. That's where they're going with it. I assume that they're probably assuming that they're going to get more listings because they're only listing it for 3% instead of 4, 5, or 6.
Are they pretty open to then? So you come in with your 3% or 2%. Are they giving any pushback on that, or are they okay with it? They're just, you know, like you say, they're trying to get a listing, so I'm charging you whatever amount. But are
I've
they
only
still
one
encouraging the
this
seller?
my very first one this year demanded not to pay any, so it did have to go back on my buyer, and I had to charge them the 3%.
How'd that go over?
Not very good, but it's negotiations.
Yeah.
It's not always fun having those conversations, but we had the conversation before we started searching, and this house came across. They wanted this house, and that was part of the negotiations. They were not paying out anything, so you have to pay the 3%.
Did they write you a check, or did you increase the sale price?
No, they wrote a check.
Wow, good buyers.
So this is where I kind of get I don't know, I won't say confused, but our pricing on our houses, if you look back over history, have always included commission, right? So now if you're listing a house and you're not going to factor in the commission costs or, the whole sales costs that you do on your net sheet when you're presenting that to a seller, in your situation, Dan, was the house listed for less?
No, it wasn't. I tried talking my buyers out of buying this house.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it was not their best deal, but they were on a budget and there wasn't very many homes in their budget. So they were kind of pinched.
Yeah. Okay. And that's what I always tell people too, like, just because you're signing the buyer's rep that says 3% commission doesn't mean you have to pay it. Like if we get to a roadblock and the seller isn't going to pay it or it's 0% commission payout, then the buyer and I have a conversation again, like, okay, the sellers are not offering in commission. You obviously don't go to your job for free. I don't go to my job for free. We can renegotiate this, or you can say, nope, I'm not going to buy the house because I don't want to have to, as a buyer, I don't want to have to pay the commission part of it. I said, you're not locked into that by no means. It's every house is going to be different if we're looking at 5 to 6 houses. And I always tell them I know what the commission is going into the house. I let them know that, like there's 0% commission. I myself haven't encountered that yet, but I always, when I'm explaining the buyer's rep, I tell them that. The next one might be 2. Our agreement says 3. We'll have this discussion for every house just so they know. And that seems to put people at ease, like just because I'm saying I have to, I still have the decision to buy that house and how that's going to affect me. And I say the same thing, like we just got to go back to the lender. Is it in your budget to be able to do that? And that usually puts people a little bit at ease, more like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I had an option per house.
So I'm wondering
remember,
what agents, I'm sorry, Dan.
You got to also remember, you don't know what's going on the listing side. And I've seen people list homes for 5% payout to get 3, when it comes to closing and you see the Alta or the settlement statement, whatever you want to call it, and you walk away and you're getting 2 and they're getting 3. So I always ask for all of my commissions and then negotiate it down when it comes to it. Because I found that a lot of times I actually do get that 0.5% more. I might not get all 3, I might get 2.5. And then when the Alta comes through, it was a 50-50 split. So that agent was trying to get 3 and only pay out 2.
Yeah, and you can't get it if you don't ask for it. So
absolutely, you already got the no.
So I'm wondering when you're a buyer's agent and you're going to go show a house, do you call the listing agent first to find out what the payout is, or do you wait until there's some interest and then ask them?
I wait until there's interest. I can show a client 5, 6, 7 homes. I don't need to be bothering that listing agent with my greed of commissions.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is we'll have a PDF on our desktop, and it's got if the seller is doing a shared commission, and anytime we see that there is a showing request, we will send that out as a PDF so they know ahead of time what the payout's going to be, and that seems to be pretty well received. It's nice knowing ahead of time.
I'm a 50-50. If I have time to do it, I will. If I'm happen to be busy and I'll do it later.
Yeah.
I think when everything changed, we got calls right away. I mean, every agent was, calling right away. And I think that has really relaxed a lot. One question I have for the group maybe, and it would be nice to know. So if someone calls you on the phone for a lead, like Dan or Nathan, I'm not sure who else is on here, or Michelle, do you talk about that buyer's rep on your phone call, or do you surprise them with it when you get to the house?
I talk about it right away. It still feels clunky in conversation sometimes, but the last thing I'm going to do is drive across town to go show a house and have somebody not sign the form that I stick in front of their nose.
Michelle, how about you?
I try to talk about it up front. And if it's not very clear, I will always see if they want to come in. Another option is I will send them the paperwork and then call them after, just to make it clear. I don't like doing it when I'm on the showing. I like to do it before.
And Dan, it sounds like you do it at the door.
Yep, usually when I'm making the appointment with them, I'm asking them if they've already been looking at homes. And if they say they've been looking at homes, then I know they've probably talked to another agent, and then that leads me into the discussion of have they signed a buyer rep with anybody? And then let them know that there's some documents we'll have to sign prior to going in the house.
Okay, good. Yeah, I do the same thing. I have the phone conversation. When it first kind of started, I'll be honest, I kind of tried to I don't want to talk about this. So I just made it as easy little conversation. And, so before I can show the house, when we get there, I have some forms to go over with you. And I had some people, oh, okay. You get those buyers, they have no idea what you're saying to them. And they're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And then you get to the house but I've never had one at the house. It's just been awkward. But I maybe one or two where I'm like, I can't do it that way. I felt nervous walking to the door with them. Oh, I got to talk about this. So for me, I just found it's best. I have to have the conversation when I have them on the phone and when I'm setting it up with them. And I've had maybe 2 or 3 that have said, nope, not signing any forms. Click. That's it. So as I always wonder, well, did they ever get in the house? Did they ever eventually find out that, yes, I truly had to sign this form? Should have called Candy back. I don't know.
Yeah, but to that end, that's kind of why I'd like using that tour agreement, because maybe those 2 or 3 or buyers, if you said it's a tour agreement, you don't owe me anything. It's for just this much time. Would that solve some of those problems and maybe get you some more business by not freaking out the buyers?
Yeah, we don't have a tour agreement in our MLS.
No, we don't.
Oh, that's right. You're not on North Star.
Yeah, well, I am, but not every agent is. But our local association has not allowed to do the tour agreement.
Yeah, they don't have one here in Duluth either.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
I do tell people they have an option. I don't love it, but if I kind of feel like I'm getting a little bit of pushback, I'll tell them that, hey, we can just do this agreement for this house. We can just do it for this house. Test each other out. If you're like, I didn't really like her, you don't have to call me back again. You have 0 commitment. I said, it's a kind of a test drive. And I've had it maybe 2 times just in this last 2 weeks, maybe where they'd signed it just for that day because they were reluctant about it. One of them, they had the son looking at the house for them. And then now I've shown 3 houses and finally I'm like, can we just sign an agreement? I'm tired of, redoing this all the time. And so now I did get them to sign. They were still a little reluctant though. So they did a 3-month contract instead. But I've had success with that, saying, let's just do it for just this house or just this day. And that actually has worked. So that kind of replaces our tour agreement, maybe, so to speak.
And that's kind of the beauty of the contract that we have is you can do it for just a house. You can do it for 7 days, the buyer up contract.
Right.
And then change that after they feel comfortable, after you feel comfortable, however that is. The one thing you said though, Candy, is that, you wondered if those people ever got in a house. Well, it kind of makes you wonder if they did and if they signed it with somebody else or if some agent just showed them without having a contract.
Well, I just had one
makes you wonder.
yesterday. Yep, it does make me wonder. I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus. I'm not gonna put anybody, in front of court. But I had a buyer yesterday that reached out to me early in the morning. I connected with them, set up a showing time, talked about the buyer's representation. We can do it for just this house, blah, blah, blah. She called me back and said another agent called me and actually is going to show me some other houses. And I said, perfect. And I said something about, I don't know how the conversation went anymore, but something about a buyer's contract. And she's like, well, that agent hasn't talked to me about that yet. And I just said, oh, okay. I said, well, just make sure that they go over the contract with you. And then she called me later in the day and she said, I just wanted to tell you that agent actually never even showed me or talked to me about a contract. I said, did you look at the houses? She said, yep, we looked at 5 houses. And I just said, well, I said, I didn't say anything about anything bad. I just said, well, I'm just telling you, you could look it up yourself. I think she was kind of coming to me like, I think like I was lying to her and trying to get her under contract. And I just said, you can look it up, just Google, the NAR settlement. And I haven't heard back from her. It doesn't really matter anymore, but yeah. So I know there's agents out there. I had another buyer too that they're running around calling the listing agents. I think, and then it's kind of a different situation. Anyways, I know they've been looking at agents or houses with another agent. And I said, well, are you under contract with her? Because I know they're playing us both together. And she said, no. And I said, and you've looked at houses since August? And she said, yep. And I just said, well, just so you know, she's supposed to have you under contract. So.
I got a question for Lori when she's got a second.
Now, just let me answer this quick, Dan. I do know that certain companies have their own showing agreements because I've seen them through looking through the files, and I don't know why they give them to us, but it's very strange what buyer's agents just hand over to us. But so I do know that. So I guess we can't always just assume that they're doing something wrong, but it does make you wonder.
Yeah.
And Dan, what did you want to ask?
The non-exclusive buyer rep contract.
Yeah.
If you have them sign that, isn't it just like how we used to run? You're just representing, showing them homes, and then they can go with any agent.
Yep.
So
I'd be careful using that because, again, you could be showing them a lot of houses and they could call up one agent that has a new listing and you've worked a long time and you don't get anything and there's no way to recoup that.
right. But it makes those buyers feel like you're not locking them in and you build a little trust.
But again, you could do that too with a regular buyer rep contract that just is for 2 days, 1 day, that house.
You know,
Again, it's all on how you want to do your business, but again, there's options. And that's one of them.
I always use exclusive. I don't use the non-exclusive. I don't want to put in all this work for them and then have them have the option to go to someone else, but.
Yeah, Lori,
Does anybody?
Sorry, Rick.
No, you go ahead.
No, I'm just looking for a clarification on something from Lori, because I know that in open houses, if people come into your property, you do not need to have a buyer's rep in place to show that house. What if someone calls you up as a lead and wants to see just that house? Are you required to have the exclusive right to rep or not?
Depends on your MLS. It's all an MLS thing. So for example, here in Duluth, if you're the listing agent, you can show your listing to a buyer without having a contract. In the Twin Cities Metro, the North Star MLS requires, which is why they have that showing. I don't know about RASM, but I'm pretty sure that they require it. And I'm not sure on CMAR. But again, it's all of the NAR settlement requirements are being policed by the MLS. So you'd have to contact your MLS to make sure you're following the rules correctly.
Cool, thank you.
I was just going to bring up, I had a situation this past summer where my new buyers had very, very good employment, but no money. I mean, barely money for an earnest money. And I had to have kind of a, personal conversation with them about this buyer rep because they just said, we absolutely can't afford to pay you. So we're gonna have to either look at houses that offer it, or we made a couple offers and they didn't get it because they didn't have the competitive edge of being able to, you know, waive that. I mean, they wanted me to get paid. They couldn't pay me. So anyway, we ended up buying new construction, which the construction company paid me. But sometimes it gets kind of personal. It's like, you know, I said, if you sign this and you agree to 2.7 or whatever, and we find a house that you like, that you want to buy, that doesn't offer that, you'll have to pay me. And they just said, I can't. So, you know, that gets kind of into some weeds, because I can't not show them houses based on no commission. But you know, I suppose I could call them and tell them I called the agent and they're not offering it, and then it's their decision not to see it. So you know, just there's some, I haven't had anything else except that situation where that even came up, because it's just kind of business as usual for me. But it can get kind of tricky sometimes, or personal, I guess. I guess that wasn't a question, it was just a comment.
No, but it's a really good scenario. And I think, you know, in that scenario, if you approach it something to the effect that if we get to that situation where you found your house that you really want, we can look at that 2.7, and maybe we can figure out what's going to be best on what you offer on that property. And then we can adjust my commission accordingly. You know, you can kind of work it in that way. Because again, our job is to get our clients into properties, and our commission is always secondary. And so, you know, maybe having that conversation could have maybe comforted them a little bit and made them see that you weren't just out to get the money.
Yeah, I agree with that. In their case, because they were only qualified for so much, and there was really nothing worthwhile to look at under that, you know, in the lower price ranges, everything they liked kind of reached them up to their max of their qualifications. So that kind of added another bend to it. But it all worked out in the end, and they're very happy because they got new construction, and with closing costs paid and the commission paid and everything. But it just can be a little uncomfortable, I guess, at times approaching it.
So you did your job. You got them into the house, and you also got paid. Good job.
Thank you.
And it is an uncomfortable situation. I mean, I hate talking money. I don't like to fundraise. I just don't like asking for it. So it is hard. You kind of got to find your own script that makes you feel comfortable with it. And know that every situation is going to be different. Every buyer is going to have, you know, different conversations and different questions, and some are going to be easier and some are going to be harder. You just have to make sure you're standing for your worth, and your value, and show your value as well, which I think is hard when you get a lead on the phone, because they don't know you. They don't know your value. So, you know, try your best to always get people to come in, or even a phone call for a buyer's consult is better than no consult. But you know, you get those ones that call and, nope, just want to go look at a house today. And it's hard. It is hard.
So I've got a question. So prior to the lawsuit, how many of you agents had the conversation with your buyers, or we always ask them, do you know how we get paid? And that's, you know, prior to this. And I think my sense tells me that a lot of agents didn't have that conversation. So I'm just wondering, you know, again, prior to this, did you talk about how you get compensated? Because like you say, Candy, money's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. But we've always made that part of our buyer presentation, is to say, you know, just, do you know? Because then then you get to explain how the whole thing works, you know, the splitting of commissions. But I'm just wondering, before I start yapping here too much, what people have done in the past.
When I
I
was,
personally,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I always have that conversation. I just start out with, when it was in the MLS, I said, I don't know what the whole thing is but this is what they're paying out to me. But just so you know that it's split basically 4 ways, and it's determined by brokerages how that's split. And I've always done that just so, because a lot of times I used to have young buyers that just thought they paid me because they hired me to be their realtor. That was how it was. And so I just got that. I got that done when I did the buyer rep form.
I know that when I first started in real estate, I never did until I was showing a couple houses and we were driving back from a town outside of the Mankato area. And they thought that, I don't know how the conversation got started, but they thought that I got paid for doing open houses. They thought the company paid for my gas. They thought the company paid for my insurance on my car.
Oh, wouldn't that be sweet?
Yeah. And I was kind of dumbfounded because I'm like, wow, I really need to explain how I get paid to people. It was like an eye opener. So, we assume a lot that people know. So it is always a good conversation. And after that point, I always went over how I got paid.
Yeah.
What I typically
Yeah.
do if I'm having a buyer's consult, I'll go over the buyer's rep with them. And again, I mean, you go over as much detail as you can, but if they're a new buyer, you've lost them in the first minutes because it's so much. So you kind of try to summarize the best that you can, providing the information that they really need to know and you should go over. But I always bring a blank seller's disclosure with, or compensation disclosure, I mean. I always bring that with, and I'll tell them like I have to disclose to you how Century 21, I don't always say me, maybe that's right or wrong, gets paid. And that's been helpful too, because then they know I have to tell them that I can't pull anything over them. And then when they see that form, like, oh yeah, she did tell me that that she had to disclose to me how she was going to get paid, and here's that form. And obviously there's not a number in it, so I just tell them I always put my admin number or in there, so that's already in there for them, so they can see that part of it as well.
Nathan, you got any thoughts on that? If you're still awake.
Sorry, I had a call. What was the question?
That's quite all right. We were just talking about having the conversation, when you first meet with your buyer, do you disclose how you get paid? Because, especially like Candy said, in the old days, buyers had no idea how we got paid. So that's why we have always made it a policy and it's like Rick Lindy too, just to always say, do you know how we get paid, and then explain how we get paid. So I'm just wondering what your practice was prior to this.
I'm probably not the right person to ask prior to this stuff. I did have a discussion with it. I'm guilty that I was good with agency because that's one that I saw a coworker get slapped with years and years and years back. But as far as a representation agreement, I was kind of like you, Kevin, where I kind of wanted to make sure we were going to be a good fit before we got too far down the line. And I have told people this isn't working. And then I wasn't on a representation contract. That was probably even a previous brokerage. But now I think with the rule changes, I think you have to be very above board. You have to get those documents out. I just had a call with a referral on Friday, and it's a first time buyer, which is even harder because they don't understand the old way of doing things. They've got no experience with it. So again, I felt like the conversation was fine, but probably a bit clunky. And I just sent all the documents over on a PDF with a link to the NAR website that discusses the settlement stuff, and just said, we absolutely don't have to sign this right away, but we do have to have something in place before we go tour houses. So, like I said, my experience probably a little different than Dan's. I still see most of the time when I'm calling on agents, There still is seller compensation of some type. If it's not broker compensation, these agents are saying that, you know, write in what your compensation is on 406. Sellers are open to pay for it. So I took a pretty good size haircut on one late. It was probably a December contract. But I didn't go after them for the remainder of what was on my, I just amended my buyer rep agreement. It was a 0.5% on a $900,000 house. So that's actually quite a bit of money. But I just told those clients, my goal is to continue a relationship down the road. And so I'm not going to worry about picking up pennies. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
In your typical Nathan way, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Just talk
I
big
would say
circles.
I would say before the new lawsuit, or the new, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I didn't get a buyer's rep signed right away. It was just quick, let's go. Yeah. I did when I could, but it didn't always work that way. But now you have to slow down, you have to pause, and you have to do it.
I mean, some good did come out of this, you know, the
I agree.
lawsuit. I think that it is more transparent. I think buyers have a better understanding of how we operate and how we get paid. So some good did come. I just read a national survey, and they said, you know, initially, like last August, when the laws went into effect, that there was a dip somewhat in commissions. And now it's back, like Nathan said, pretty much back to normal. You know, there was just very, very little effect. So attorneys got rich, and it didn't change the world. But that's just me.
All right, Kevin, want to sum it up for us? We have about 3 minutes left, I think.
Oh, I think you're the smart one here, Candy.
I don't know about that. All right. In summary, one, thank you guys all for coming. We value your input and the conversation very much so. Make sure you're telling other agents about Agent 21. I think it's a great place to just learn what other agents are doing. And if you pick up one tip, like I picked up a tip myself. So spread the word. We would love to have you. And I guess in summary of what we talked about a lot of stuff. So hopefully you had a walk away of something that you learned. If there's other topics that you guys want to hear about and have discussion on, let us know. I think this is our Dog and Pony show on the third Thursday of the month, I think, Kevin. So yeah, summary, I guess, would be get those buyers rep signed, have the conversations as clunky and uncomfortable as they are. Make sure you're having that conversation and disclosing what we need to be disclosing.
I'll add one thing to that, Candy, if I can. One thing I took away when we did have to start doing this was it really helped me realize that we were in a very convenient situation with our Minnesota Nice and not having to talk about all this stuff up front with clients. Think about your mechanics and your plumbers and everybody else that they are not shy about telling you what their services are going to cost right away. And I think that's part of what we just need to get into that mindset. We bring a lot of value. We're good at what we do. Here's what I'm going to make on this deal.
Yeah.
And I think with the old way, it was convenient and we got to be shy and not have to put it right in front of them. But now we do. And now we have a reason to show them, you know, why we get paid what we do.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a rabbit hole you can go down. It's like doctors don't have to tell us what they're going to charge. You get the bill and you're like, oh, what? You know, or lawyers or whoever it might be. But yeah. So we just do it.
Yep. But I hope everyone likes this format of discussion. I learned a long time ago that agents learn probably more from each other than from any other source. So I do like agents communicating with each other and getting to know each other a little bit and learning. So I hope this is a good format for you guys. And like Candy said, you know, tell your friends. The more people we have involved in this, the better the conversations. But definitely thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Candy.
Everybody have a good day.
Thanks. Bye now.
Bye now.
Bye.